Welcome to the QualiWare user group meeting for September 2023. My name is Tamara Sakley. I am the business support specialist for CloseReach. So just to go through our agenda, there's going to be some introductions and housekeeping. Kevin is going to give you a little bit of CloseReach news and an update. We also have Cynthia Chu and Chris Veros from D&D DEA to do a customer update. Then Devlin Lemoyne, one of our CloseReach employees, will be covering the new 10.8 dashboards. Following that, we have Kevin jumping in at the tech corner and giving us the customer journey templates in QualiWare to promote collaboration. And then to finish off, we're going to have an open forum for the last 15 minutes of the meeting. If anyone has any comments or questions or just chit chat, we will have that option as well. So just for quick housekeeping, feel free to keep your cameras and microphones on, but make sure that your microphone's muted while others are presenting. The meeting is recorded and is going to be publicly available on CloseReach's YouTube channel. We can start off actually with some introductions. If any of the participants want to introduce themselves, we can start off at the top. If you want to tell us where you're from and how you're using QualiWare within your organization or the organization that you're working with. Adam Cunningham, would you like to start us off?
Hello, I'm Adam Cunningham. I'm a contractor at National Defense, and I install and support and maintain QualiWare.
Thanks, Adam. Eric Baum. Oh, I think he popped off. Sam Beland.
Yep, hello, my name is Samuel Belan. I'm working at the CBSA. I'm currently the acting manager of the agency collaboration platform, or QualiWare.
Awesome, thanks, Samuel. Peter Bezinson.
I am working for Sam's team at CBSA.
Perfect. Denise Boisvert-Dingley.
Hi, I'm Denise, and I'm a contractor currently on contract at SSC. I'm primarily involved these days in setting up the web interface and also working on the governance configuration.
Thanks, Denise. James Chiang.
Yes, hi, name is James Chiang, manager for the CBSA architecture program temporarily until maybe sometime in November, and it should be back at the ACP team, the QualiWare team, soon after that.
Perfect. Thanks, James. Kelly Coughlin.
Hi there, Kelly Coughlin, technical lead for QualiWare at PSPC, and all the CloseReach folks know me quite well.
Francois Couillard.
Hi, everyone. I run the Enterprise Architecture Program at Global Affairs Canada. We're on 10.8 in the Quali Cloud, and we're working hard on the business architecture domain, but also working hard with CloseReach services to obtain a PB environment, and we're trying to figure out which way to go.
Perfect, thanks. Dave.
I'm thinking you need me, David Gray. I am a CloseReach contractor, currently been laid off from D&D. They let go all the contractors, and just waiting to see if another contract comes in.
Thanks, Dave. Devlin Lemoyne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Devlin. I am part of the CloseReach support team. I've worked with many of you, and I work with QualiWare quite a bit. So I'm excited to do a little presentation later.
Thanks, Devlin. Dragos Robu.
Hello, my name is Dragos. I'm a business analyst with CloseReach. I help provide consulting and support services as part of the customer success team. Thank you.
Thanks, Dragos. Jerry Larkin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jerry Larkin. I'm the Quality and Compliance Manager at CloseReach. My main use for for QualiWare is quality and compliance, and through our compliance management solution, and also through our new business innovation solution.
Thanks, Jerry. Steve Hayward.
Hi, Steve Hayward with Canada Border Services. I'm the business architecture domain lead, and QualiWare is the platform for our agency collaboration platform, which has all of our architecture repository.
Thanks, Steve. Daniel Howen.
Hi, I'm Dan Howen. I'm technical lead at CRA. We're using QualiWare for our IT architecture, and we're expanding it to business architecture, which we're doing right now.
Thanks. Kevin O'Rourke.
Kevin O'Rourke, president of CloseReach, and can't find my mute button.
Thanks, Kevin.
Welcome, everybody. Glad to see a lot of old names and faces. Well, not old, but from last year, and some new people as well. So that's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. And Gerald Ladd.
Good afternoon. Gerald Ladd, technical advisor with Telecom Services, one of the business line occasional users of QualiWare. Right now, I'll be using it for our initiative into cloud computing, generative AI, when it is able to be used by our cells for developing extensions to the larger language module. I'm also going on my first formal QualiWare course next month. So after using it off and on for 10 years, I'll learn how to use it properly. And SSC, of course, is a staunch supporter of QualiWare and use it for our IT architecture. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerald. Steve Leslie.
Hi, I'm Steve Leslie. I work for shared services in the enterprise architecture team. I do some modeling for the practice and look at business requirements to specs for changes to the meta model.
Perfect. And Lise.
Hi, my name is Lise Painter. I work at SSC, and I am a consultant at SSC doing release management, change management for QualiWare, their QualiWare implementation.
Thanks, Lise. Is there anyone else that I missed? Maybe it came later on? Please feel free to unmute yourself and say hi.
Jeff Taranto, work with Global Affairs Canada Business Architecture Domain Lead under Francois.
Welcome. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Pierre Lefebvre. I was a contractor at D&D and in the IT and IT security architecture area, and also reference architecture.
Nice to see you.
I'll jump in. Mike Haley with Landmark Decisions. So we're a CloseReach partner, and I work closely with Bob Bavere in the development and deployment of collaborative business planning, the add-on for business process improvement in QualiWare.
Hey, Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone. Cindy with CloseReach. I'm on the customer success team, working with Devlin, Dragos, Tamara, and a couple of others on the team, providing support in QualiWare and also working on some processing and some backend stuff.
Nice indeed.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Veris. I'm a principal consultant with Prometheus Solutions. I've been on contract at National Defense for a few years now, working with Vince and Cynthia, and I'll be co-presenting with Team D&D for the customer update today, and also working on NORAD modernization, transformation architects, so working a lot on business modeling and transformation roadmaps using QualiWare.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Vince Cannell from Department of National Defense. One of the section heads there in the enterprise architecture team, responsible for the framework and the tool implementation.
Hi, Carol Ranger from ESDC. I'm working with solution architecture and business architecture, and we're focused on implementing a requirements management framework using QualiWare. Thank you.
Hi, Carol.
Jennifer Voss from CBSA. I'm the Manager of Enterprise Business Architecture.
Hi, Jennifer. Okay, I think that's it. So welcome everybody. So we can start off with Kevin and giving us a little bit of an update with CloseReach news.
Great. Good to see everybody again after a good summer. QualiWare 10.9. So the latest word we have on this is that their 10.9 version will be coming out in about 4 to 6 weeks. So they're doing some finalized testing, and then it's due to be released. A little while ago, we talked with people about license auto provisioning. So QualiWare is working on a license server that will understand when your licenses are coming due and automatically inform us and you with required new licenses, or if there's a license request, funnel through us, we can get it provisioned through this online system. Just got an update on that today, and we're looking at a late October, early November implementation for that. So 10.9 and the license auto provisioning should be coming along at around the same time. So the SALSA software licensing supply arrangement, for those that don't know what that is, it's an alternate method to buy certain types of licenses that aren't on our GCEA solution contract. It expires in 4 days, but we have new ones in place that will fire up starting on the 30th or the 1st of October. So currently we have a SALSA for QualiWare software. So anyone who has subscription licensing, you're aware of that, and you do that procurement through the SALSA. Additional QIS licenses and things like that. So that the pricing is, we'll honor the pricing that we have under the GCEA solution on the SALSA, and I don't believe the pricing has changed there from what's currently up. We had CBP in the past before on the SALSA as well, and we've refreshed that as well. And CloseReach actually has a SALSA ourselves for our compliance management solution and business innovation module and others. So when that gets posted, the start of next week, you'll be able to look there for QualiWare add-ons, so additional components that can reside on your QualiWare implementations. So we're glad to have gotten that done. They had some new people in PSPC, and it took us a little bit longer than expected. But
I'm down here in a webinar.
Anyhow.
Sorry.
No worries. Training. We have a new course that we're putting up, and we're going to launch it in November, and it's for modeling on the web. So it will teach some things like, the text and import to model, some of the automations around that. It will teach people how to use the web modeler effectively and what some of the limitations are there. So you can expect to see that. If it's not on our training calendar yet, it will be shortly. So, and at in October, we'll be standing up some special pricing for the different streams that we've got up on our QualiWare training roadmap. So in the past, we've sort of, each course is standalone, and it still is. But if people are interested in what we've put together in the training roadmap, there will be some advantageous pricing there. So, and we have courses running in November, October and November, basic, advanced, governance workflow, and publisher. So all of that is on our website on the training calendar. If you're looking for dates, I would suggest you go there. QualiWare has been involved for a number of years with a company called the Intersection Group, and they have an organizational design framework, and it's called EDGI. So we're actually going to run a webinar in October to talk about that notation and that framework. And the notation is already in QualiWare, so it's available to everybody. But how an organizational designer might use it and the various templates and things like that will be discussed in the webinar in October. So we've tied into an organizational design group that's using all of this out of Montreal, and we'll have the originators of it from Europe in the call as well. So should be an interesting little session. One thing I didn't mention, actually, in terms of training as well, we actually ran an in-person business architecture course. And of course, somebody tested positive. Had to be, right? But the course actually ran, I think it ran quite well. Roger Burleton came into town and ran it in person. And I think the people that were on it got a lot out of it. Kelly, maybe you want to comment?
Excellent course. That's all I got to say.
There you go. So we're going to be running another one just after Christmas, New Year's. We're in the process of booking the time for that. So if there were people that missed Roger's course this time around, we'll, and it'll be in person again. We'll get you booked in on that one. And CloseReach is in its 20th year of existence. So our fiscal year stretches across 23-24. And so this is our 20th year of conducting business. So we're going to have a couple of special events through the year, and we're planning something at Cake and Things for our open house just before Christmas. So we'll make sure that people get all the details, and we'll see what we can do about some special pricing on some things as well in celebration of that. Anyhow, that's all the news. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. All right, and next up we have Cynthia and Chris with a D&D DEA update.
Hi, Cynthia had an emergency, so I'll be filling in as the backup. Chris will making the presentation, and as he sets up to share his screen. So we've been away from the presentation scene in the QuGs for a while. So Cecile twisted my arm and asked me to come back and give a bit of an update. It's been a few years since we presented, so we'll give an overview of where you are with the program, recognizing they'll probably generate some questions and maybe some future topics where we can come back with certain things in the future. So this will be a bit of an overview, and as well as looking at the kinds of things that we're engaged in today inside D&D. So I'll pass it over to Chris. Go ahead.
Thanks, Vince. Can everyone hear me and or see me and or see the presentation on the screen?
Yep. And yep.
Good. So I'll just get right into it. So my understanding today is we were sort of asked about trying to share some experiences of how our program has unfolded over the years at D&D and sort of where we're at sort of now in terms of some significant or noteworthy client activities that we're doing. So with that, I'll just go through the deck. I think the deck was distributed, so it'll be available to people to have a chance to look at. And I'm not one for reading points per point off the deck, so invite you to look at it and then hear our discussion and then ask questions at the end. So The DEA program. So D&D was probably, I'll say, one of the first adopters formally for enterprise architecture amongst the federal departments. Probably mitigated, or probably driven rather, by the need for having, there's massive systems in terms of the scale and scope, and there's a lot of complexity to those systems and services and programs, and so the need to interoperate even within the military from the different environments, Army, Navy, Air Force, as well as interoperate with our allies, with NATO, with NORAD. So that's probably that probably was the main drivers on why we were probably one of the pioneers in embracing EA as a practice. So we currently report to the VCDS, and we're in the process of potentially, well, it's not potentially, it's imminent. We're going to be moving to our new transformation office, our new ADM level transformation program. And we understand that's probably a common service for a common trend that we're seeing in terms of other federal departments, and where architecture is being very closely linked to transformation. So the next slide I'm showing here is really our framework, and we have what we call the DINDAF, the D&D Architecture Framework, and it was, I think, initially derived from the Department of Defense Architecture Framework, since we obviously work very closely with our allies to the south of us. And for the most part, the best thing I want to do, if everybody hasn't heard of this already, is we basically, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of models or variations of models, and so we've tried to pick a subset of those so that we would have a more common design language. And we've created what we call views, which is a collection of different models that hopefully, through the process of doing the due diligence on how you would describe the main drivers and interests of any system, by going through all of those different views, you're able to basically provide a complete architecture picture. So that's as much as I would want to get into that for this deck, but we offer a training session on the DINDAF when new contractors who may be very experienced architects come into the department. It's a process for them to get indoctrinated into, I'll say, a bit of the D&D flavor. So in terms of the program implementation approach, I'll give everyone a bit of a history lesson on the formation of the enterprise architecture program in defense. So like many enterprises, the architecture program was born out of the CIO or IMIT department. And I'm assuming that as systems started to advance in complexity and maturity, the need to organize the solution design aspects gave way to the need to have enterprise architecture. And that was very much the focus way back in the early 2000s. And that led to creating the architecture framework, which is where we leveraged, again, working with our allies, working off the Department of Defense, working off of NATO, and the DINDAF was created in the latter part of the 2000s, 2007 timeframe. And then a few years after that, I think we were one of the first, if not the first, departments to get an enterprise level tool set in terms of QualiWare to basically try to run this on a more enterprise scale versus, traditionally using drawing tools like Visio or Sparks or some other modeling tools. So, which I think set the stage for having Treasury Board look for that take up across other federal departments. So, D&D, I think, does have that sort of feather in its cap as sort of being one of the pioneers for an enterprise-wide solution and propagating QLM as an enterprise tool set. Now, by 2013, and this was the trend that I would say denotes why this move happened, is I think more and more of enterprise architecture modeling was getting, I'll say, advancing beyond simply, I'll say, the solution space, and was more about as we've referred to it, bridging the strategy and the execution. And so we were getting more and more strategic layered architecture modeling as an effort. And as part of that, there was a move to move the DEA out of the CIO and into the VCDS, the Vice Chief and Defense Staff, which is basically sort of the policy sort of center of gravity, sort of the second in command, if you will, to the Chief of Defense Staff. And that happened in the 2013 or thereabouts. And by 2019, that meant we had more program, I'll say, advancement, where we were being a little more, we were advancing the program, we were trying to expand its mandate. We formalized it in what are called defense order and directives, DOADs. And so that sort of identified, in essence, almost a charter of what people should be doing in order to advance the program throughout the department. And at that point, it became the idea of it being almost like another type of professional management practice, just like you would do human resource management, or you would do financial management, you would do enterprise architecture. So we also have had a roadmap that we've been published, and that includes moving over to the transformation office. So that's kind of the time frame. So the real thrust of that is to show the path of, this was born out of maybe organizing the solution and the implementation aspects, and it's advanced to be more of a drop down, a bridge between the strategic planning and business planning functions. And so this next slide builds on that theme, and this is very much derived from many of my colleagues here on the line. People are TOGAF certified. This is very much a piece of the TOGAF framework, where I've seen certain architects kind of argue amongst themselves about saying, "Oh, you're just a whiteboard architect. You're not a real architect. You don't architect solutions." And I think what TOGAF has been good at articulating is it's all architecture. It's just at different levels and at different layers. So we have the strategic, and then the project, and the segment kind of combines those two, or bridges those two, is how I tend to think about it. So whiteboard architecture is still architecture. It's still a way of trying to make plans consumable and being able to then provide a logic framework to map your solutions delivery back to the plans, give you better coverage to understand how you're delivering on your plans. In terms of the D&D corporate planning process, we have a planning process which it's based on mapping capabilities. And then there is a status, a standard set of dimensions that people are meant to look at in terms of infrastructure, cost, engineering. So there's these standard dimensions where you would look at a capability from a non-solution, a solution agnostic approach. A capability, I would think of it as being a prerequisite. You define your capability and the need for a capability. And then that would be the preface into starting to do any requirements definition. If there is a investment decision made that we should pursue getting that capability, whether that capability needs to be updated, if it's an existing capability, or if there's a gap, if there's a deficiency. So we have, as part of our gating process, one of the first things that you would do as a precursor to initiating a project is to do a capability deficiency description. And then that would create the need to bridge that capability. The output of project deliverables are what we would refer to as building blocks. And you could have a building block, one or more building blocks coming out of projects. And I think from our perspective, from the enterprise architecture program, we try to think about deliverables as being very much how can they be reused across different solution spaces. So we're hoping to have less one-off building blocks and more building blocks that are reusable. And each one of these planning cycles, I mean, we have an annual planning cycle, we would have a multi-year planning cycle, we have what's called the capability-based plan, which is typically updated or republished every 3 to 5 years. So that's the different planning horizons. Those are in essence aligned to where we would tend to try to have architecture roadmaps that would show the interim or the evolving architectures through each of those different planning solutions. So this is really trying to describe how we have basically started to really slowly fuse and weave together a fabric of planning and then architecture at the strategic level being the other side of that, which is then elaborated on in terms of segment and solution architectures. So if we look at this slide, and I'll build this slowly just to build a little bit of suspense, we sort of look at what we call the lines of inquiry, which is sort of how the different views were orchestrated. This goes all the way back to the initial architecture, enterprise architecture framework type stuff, giving a nod to, say, Zachman with the questions, right? So I kind of humorously said that architects are a bit like investigative journalists, right? So they ask all the main questions, the eternal questions. And then from that, you basically want to answer those in the form of the models of the architecture that you're portraying. We have basically, the DEA has this, what we call transformation cycle, which is inform, decide, and transform, which is about basically trying to increase, if we think of planning as being both a bottom-up and a top-down process that coexists and sort of should align at a certain level when they fuse and meet in the middle. We think of inform and decide and transform as a bit of a rotary engine. And so what we try to describe is EA being a process that can accelerate that rotary engine and in essence then create agility in the organization. And that's done again by weaving together at different layers of architecture from the strategic, the segment, and the project layer. So what you see here on this slide is basically we have a bit of a enterprise context model, which is how we show how there's the planning, the top-down planning, policy driving, change being driven from the outside in terms of the mandate from the public and from our ministry. And then the bottom-up planning, which is often very much rooted in here's what we can do, here's the art of the possible. We're often being asked to do more than we have resources for. And so the bottom-up planning shows what is the art of the possible. And the other main component of this slide is what we're seeing as enterprise architecture as our program has evolved, that the term enterprise is very much a context sensitive and a situation dependent reference. So the enterprise may or may not always be national defense, or it might be the federal government. It may in fact be a nation, a League of Nations in terms of our allies, in terms of being part of NATO. A big push from operations and lessons learned from things like Afghanistan and other operations is the need to have what is called interoperability at day zero, so that the moment we have international operations with our allies, that we're able to operate as one force right from the start. And so that means thinking of those organizations as well as part of almost a larger enterprise that we fit in part of. So the DEA does have a role where we coordinate with colleague nations through working groups in NATO. We meet with them about between 4 and 6 times a year to come up with framework updates and standards to try and make sure that interoperability is encouraged, increased, enhanced, and optimized as part of next generation solutions. So this shows just in any given context, the enterprise can include, it could even include different public forum in terms of the operating environment that we're looking at. It could include different levels of government if we're dealing with a pan-departmental initiative, or in the case of, for example, even any relief effort or disaster relief where we're working to support provincial governments through something like, I don't know, forest fires or something like that. So in those different cases, we try to say, okay, what's the context of the enterprise? So one of the other, I'll say, key pieces, and this has probably been something that has evolved, I'll say, in the last 5 years, 7 years, through our leadership is a lot of, I'll say, very traditional enterprise architecture doctrine is very much about being compliance-based. Are you aligned with the architecture? And what we're realizing now is that the environment is where, because we have so many different almost ecosystems that we have to work within between different enterprises, whether it's working with NORAD, working with NATO, working across the federal government, which is very TOGAF dependent. We have NATO has its own NATO architecture framework. And in fact, even different nations are at different versions or generations of the NATO architecture framework. We understand and have to accept that there is still value with enterprise architecture, but working within what I would call a heterogeneous framework environment. So that means trying to de-emphasize on compliance to any one framework, but looking at the best among them and understanding that these all have common content elements. And so we try to take a greater emphasis on content. And it's not about whether things comply or not comply to a standard. But we try to now think of it more as degrees of alignment. And that's pretty consistent with what we're seeing even with a lot of, Treasury Board submission review processes and authorization processes. It's less about whether or not a project is approved or not approved, but they will often now not just simply give approval, there will be a lot of conditions and guidance with an approval, which become things to monitor as the project evolves. And that's how we look at it in terms of architectures. So when we have major projects that have a number of initiatives that have to interoperate across sister projects or other in-service capabilities, architecture is there, and it's providing that altimeter to say, here's what we're seeing, here's the degree of alignment. There could be a few, yellow flags, there could be a few orange flags, and that becomes a due diligence exercise that leadership can make an informed decision on. So we've kind of have a mantra at the DEA is we're basically coaches, not cops. We've used the analogy internally that we're a bit like fitness instructors. We try to give projects the plan that they would want to adopt if they want to have, I'll say, the optimal conditions for the best type of architecture content. And we sort of then help provide a bit of an outside view on how well that's going relative to some of the other projects and be able to report on that to management. So again, this slide is moving away from forcing one way. We have to deal with NATO projects that could be using the NATO architecture framework. And even though we have our own architecture framework, and we would say that that is our de facto standard, we have to recognize that we're going to be drawing from aspects from other frameworks, or even the TOGAF dealing across other federal departments. So again, we try not to think of it as right or wrong. We try to think of it as degrees of alignment. We try to think of it as even being across different solution domains. I mean, we also are we have our ERP solutions like other federal departments, and then some of the major ERP providers like SAP will have their own sort of architecture frameworks baked into their COTS solutions. And so we can't simply force these people to abandon that aspect of the COTS solution. We have to embrace it. So everything we refer to it then as patterns. And so we want to make sure that we can overlay the patterns and look for the parallel structures in those patterns. Even in some respects, being unstructured, we almost sort of humorously say is that is the pattern, is that it's unstructured. So emphasizing more on the strategic pieces of work we've been doing of late, we've been working with a few of our clients here. The Chief of Force Development is actually the group that we have been residing with under the Vice Chief of Defense Staff. And that in essence is kind of our I'm trying to think of the best analogy, but it's kind of our not our R&D group, but certainly I would say that the leadership team that sort of fuels advancement. The main program line item in our report to the ministry is about being the future force, defining the future force. So they look at it from a mid to long-term perspective, more out like at the 7, 10, 15-year mark in terms of what are we on the right trajectory to get to that point? Recognizing that it's a journey that from our perspective, we never reach because you do the planning update every 3 to 5 years. And as a result, that trajectory, you're confirming if you're on the right trajectory, but you never quite get there because then there's a new far off horizon that you're basically trying to pursue. So we've been working on looking at the planning process and the capability-based planning process with that, looking at the latest trends in planning in terms of, I'll say, digital transformation, like thinking of planning less as a 3 to 5 year cycle and more of as an ongoing process, and having planning to be able to be done on a more on-demand process. If people are familiar with some of the concepts of digital twinning, for example, the idea of creating a meta model or a data fabric and being able to weave all your planning information in so that if you have something that is introduced to the situation that's new, like COVID that sort of came out of nowhere, how would that affect your planning, and being able to run that through your planning models and come up with some assessments of changing funding, changing priorities, changing resource allocations. How does that affect your long-term horizon? So we've been working with the Chief of Force Development to model out processes to lend itself to more of a fluid planning process. NORAD modernization, I've been working with the NORAD modernization team for about a year now. So we are sort of in pre-startup. In Treasury Board terms, we're in pre-PA. It is a stated priority for the new minister that's come in the last few weeks or month or two. And interoperability is very much key, and basically trying to come up with a much more agile approach. There's been a lot of analysis and a lot of case studies done on the Russian-Ukraine conflict and how lessons learned about how sheer brute force and sheer power is potent, but what can be even more potent is agility and being able to have faster decision cycles and more informed decisions more quickly. So we kind of refer to that as being a bit of the decision advantage. So how do we get the decision advantage in terms of military operations? So we've been working on a systems mindset and different capabilities to complement and modernize what we call the C2 systems, the command and control systems. So to the layman, how I best try to describe that is, if anyone on the line here, hopefully, probably one of the first movies we all watched coming out of COVID was Top Gun 2. It was like a really big hit. So the systems that kind of showed the mission and how they had to do the mission, flying the plane through sort of the mountains and then up over a really steep mountain and then down into a crater and then hitting a spot that's like one building wide over 2 miles away. This whole system that sort of showed how you could model a mission is part of what we would call sort of a C2 system. So, and the last one we're looking at is CCSI. So as part of the need for more interoperability, there's been a new organization that's been created under the Vice Chief of Defense Staff that has spun out part of the Chief of Force Development and a few other aspects from IMIT and others, and it's called the Combat Systems Integration Chief. So that's the Chief of Combat Systems Integration. So they have been looking at the whole state of literally several hundred systems and looking to figure out how we just ratchet up interoperability almost at an exponential pace. How do we do that? So they look at it, they are looking to ramp up with a major architecture push that will probably have easily, I'm guessing, but they'll probably have anywhere from 25 to 50 architects over the next few years ramp up to basically do that sort of segment layer architecture, if you remember that from the earlier slides, which is how do things bridge together across all of the combat systems. And so they're working very closely with DEA. They've been almost right nipping at DEA's heels on how can we start using the enterprise features and capabilities of our tool set of QualiWare in order to make that happen. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Basically, the message is that we we work very much from a design perspective, but in the last few years, it's been much more of, I think, a strategic focus on the enterprise architecture work, which is not at the expense of the work we've been doing. It's just adding to the menu or adding to the capability. Vince, any comments or questions? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I would just, you're sharing me, I think, Chris, on your
All
screen.
right, I'm going to get off sharing now.
We can, there we go. We can share the screen side by side. Yeah, so thanks for that quick overview of where we're focused these days, where we came from. That's not to say, as you said, that there isn't a lot of other focus work in the past. You know, I noticed Kevin Wilson and Par, who were on the line today, certainly from a policy management perspective in the material management space. These are still things we're continuing to support. But what I wanted Chris to highlight for the group today is sort of what's the trajectory? Where are we going? What is, as you said, nipping at our heels in terms of who's asking new for services? And it's really a lot about digital transformation, integration of existing systems and future capabilities online, and a big worry that there's huge investments happening that are not necessarily synchronized with each other. And so, you know, there's investments and projects and things going like that that could be working at cross purposes, and the senior leadership doesn't have a good handle on what that might look like. So that's where enterprise architecture seems to be being pulled, is to answer those particular questions. I think it's important for the group to note, you know, you can see maybe from some of the smaller departments that our approach to EA is a little bit different. You know, we're not a centralized shop doing the corporate architecture top down, or certainly we've migrated out of the MIT space, not to say that there aren't architects working in that space, but, you know, from a programmatic aspect into more of a CEO or a COO function. And we're very much a service offering, sort of internal consultancy kind of approach. So that characterizes the EA program at D&D that might be different from some other shops, but it certainly marks the sort of evolution of where we've gotten to today compared to where we were in the past. So I invite anybody to make any comments or ask any questions.
I see a hand up. I can't see who it is because it's.
Oh, it's Kevin Wilson. All right,
okay.
Go ahead, Kevin.
There we go, Kevin. Are you on mute, Kevin? We can't hear you.
Kevin had problems earlier.
Oh, we can't. And maybe if you type out your question on the discussion thread, we can't hear you.
Or shout really loud.
Oh, maybe we could deal with that secretarially later. We could
I
follow
think
up.
Kevin's typing this question. If anybody else has
Oh,
any,
wonderful.
Feel free to fire them off.
Excellent.
I have a question in the meantime. Hi. Very nice story. Very, very entertaining, actually, for all the EA passionate folks out there. There was a slide where you said, we're staying away from frameworks and requirements. And my question to you is, how do you capture the enterprise requirements? Like, do you have a central repository, you know, that aligns with the TOGAF, and also the GCA framework for each domains? Do you have any advice, perhaps, to shed on this?
Yeah, so some of our situations, that's a good question, actually, and very pertinent, I think, for this community, where you're going to have differences between, I'll call it an integrated enterprise architecture versus a federated one. One of the challenges we face is that, and I've been with DA for a long time, so I know the story very well, but back in the early 2000s, we weren't going to get, you know, the Army and the Navy and the Air Force to agree on one standard. We weren't going to get them to agree that something had to be done in a singular kind of way. So when you look at D&D, it's very big in terms of the numbers of industries that we're engaged in. I mean, it's 100,000. There's lots of companies that are bigger than that, but we are in food services, we're in health services, we're in dental. You know, there's legal, there's all the security branches that we have. We've got material management, supply chain, housing, right? Each of these things are bound by the standards that exist outside their organizations, the norms, the practices, the guides. And so how do you bring everybody into one place? So what Chris was talking about is we actually have to adapt these things as, yes, testing is working. I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. So we'll finish this one and then I'll get back to you, Kevin. So what we had to do is look at how we bring all these different things together. And so we've had to be very flexible. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we use QualiWare, is because we can adapt that meta model on the fly. Like once you lock the meta model into the database, you're not bound to it. You can modify it and add things as you go. So what it means is we can, and this is happening with our Chief Combat Systems Integration team that Chris was talking about. We're engaged with them, and they're bringing a whole bunch of things in to say, well, we need this. And so we can look at those things and try and figure out, well, do we have something already that can answer the mail on that? Or do I need to adapt something and bring something in so they can now capture that information? There's pushback too, as Kevin Wilson can attest to over the many years that he and I have been working on this different stuff. And so we absorb some things, and then sometimes we push back on it as well and say, well, we can do it this way as well. So you have to balance those different things. And certainly one of the challenges we've got going on is framework. Like there's the TOGAF, which is Government of Canada. There's elements in the UK that are using that to support the NATO architecture framework, but there are a lot of other countries that are using the unified architecture framework out of the OMG or the old DODAF from the US. There's a 1.0, 1.5, and a 2. So they use those different ones. Where are we with that? It sort of becomes very much a centralized effort around the project that you're working on. So Federated Mission Network, which is an initiative that grew out of the time in Afghanistan, where all the nations had to come together and try and create a backbone that worked. There were a lot of lessons learned there. And so there's actually an active NATO effort to create the Federated Mission Networking as an initiative with an architecture. Well, that's a collaboration. So everybody comes together and you adopt the standard within the confines of that particular project. So it's very much a federated approach where different projects and different areas of the business will bring their standards, and then you have to do translation. You got to speak between them and try and see how, weaving together the most critical points as opposed to everything. So that's the difference between a federated versus an integrated architecture. I don't know if that answers your question.
That is a very good answer. Thank you very much.
I would add, and this is what I see coming at it, seeing Vince sort of with the gray hairs or whatever that he probably got over the years, is it's like a typical product life cycle. So if you looked at our timeline slide when we had the early 2000s, the focus was just getting people in, getting people to buy in to do it, right? I mean, it's like trying to get the first person to buy a fax machine. How do you get the power of all this modeling? The first person goes, I model this, no one else can even understand them, and there's nothing else to link to, so what's the point of modeling it, right? So Vince and his team, way back before I was even there, or a lot of our current people, they're focusing on just getting people to buy into it, right? But then by the time the framework started to come out in the latter part of the 2000s, you're focused on, now you've got a market, right? They were successful in getting, I think, almost 2,000 accounts created, different models, but different accounts. There's all these different workspaces because people wanted to have their own private workspace. And then he focuses on, how do we start to build the franchise, right? How do we now create a mature product? The product has penetrated the market, but now how do you get the uptakes? And then you get that sort of horizontal alignment. And so then the focus fixed on more common views. And even the last major upgrade, going back, 4 or 5 years now, was almost 2 years or a bit more in the making, because Vince was brutal about trying to get all the L1s to consolidate to at least just 1 or 2 workspaces within their ADM level. Never mind thinking of getting one for the department, but we moved from a major, it was almost 2,000 different workspaces or 200 down to like a handful.
We had 250 repositories, and we've consolidated that down to less than 20, but it's not a single one. Like it's still multiple areas. And I would say that that's because of the size and the types of industries that we're engaged in. And I would say, if you don't have to do that, don't do that. Like, if you can be integrated, you should try and do that. But it was certainly a challenge for us. So we had to have a different approach to that.
And that was 20 years ago versus now. Now, if a department was starting now, you would hope that because the practice within the government, the uptake across all departments, the guidance from Treasury Board would hopefully mean they wouldn't have to start the same way Vince did back in the early 2000s, right? Because you kind of start a little bit faster in because you're saying, well, let's learn from everyone else, not start at square one. Let's start at square 10 or 15 down the road, right? If that makes any sense.
Okay.
Yes,
I
it
think,
does. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
okay.
Thanks,
And
Karen.
to just segue into the next question, Kevin Wilson, I'll just flag, is one of those guys back in the thousands, you know, those early adopters. Kevin's been working for a long time with us. So Kevin, over to you for a question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, Mike, I put the question in the chat there, but I'll just do a bit of a preamble. We one of the biggest impediments for us in ADM MAT was having a kind of a persistent architecture practice develop, and it was often based, like it was really, and I've said this more times than once, a feast or famine, depending on the interests of management to develop the practice or not. A lot of skepticism on the value of it. It wasn't until our group finally identified a level 1 advisor for architecture that we started seeing the possibility of getting some kind of cohesive governance in. And it's been very slow going because the people who've been delegated this is are also very busy in other areas, but there's some promise there that there'll be effective controls put into place and make this more as part of the business rather than a nice to have. So really my question is that how's it going with the other groups? Are they what state are they in terms of this?
I think and this is, you know, for the rest of the assembly, try and hear the conversation as opposed to the specific items. But the MAT group certainly is, I think, out in the fore when it comes to that element. You've got at least a recognition amongst your different sub enterprises that this is something you need to collaborate on, and you need to have some governance process around it. Most of the rest of the organization is still learning about EA, and you've got individual lines of business who are trying to push forward with their domain. And it's part of both the plus and the minus of the way we set up the enterprise architecture program to be a service offering, to be inclusive, and to be something where we could pull people in. Participation was more important than enforcement. That's a symptom of that. What am I saying? I'm saying that you guys are still out in front, and that being said, the Chief of Combat Systems Integration is going to be propelling that more at the enterprise level, simply because of the role that they play. So we're looking at partnering with them to sort of push the issue of governance at an L0 level, at an enterprise level, to say we're going to need more of this. We already have in the information management group, now called the CIO group, within D&D, a process of getting in front of the GC Enterprise Architecture Review Board, where any IMIT project has to go in front of the CIO internal shop before going to the CIO Treasury Board, and they are required to produce 4 of the views of the DINDAF. So there's a mandatory 4 views. Those 4 views get reviewed by the CIO shop to move forward, for the projects to move forward. But that's at the project level. Now what we're talking about with CCSI is an integrated approach to looking at systems, at least the combat systems. And so capability development will all have to be brought into the space where which gates are going to be needed, which views are going to be needed, how to set that up. So that conversation is actually just currently happening. We've also engaged with the project approval courses. We're now engaged in briefing those courses on enterprise architecture and how the project directors, for example, have to be cognizant of EA and realize that project level is, Chris had that slide up with the 3 colored bands. The project level is often where all the horsepower is for developing architecture. You don't have a lot of horsepower in the line organizations. You, Kevin, are a little bit of an exception in that way, but most of the time the architecture comes out of the projects. So trying to get more of that governance related to the project approval tied to the money so that we can build that, get a little closer to the integrated view compared to the federated approach we've got so far. So that's where we're at today.
Just a follow-on question. You have a DoD and there's an enforcement component to that, but I think I also heard that you don't want to be like the policeman. So I think about, for example, the major Crown projects where they're building the large scale weapons systems. They don't seem to be very much engaged in the architecture, though I have, they're part of our kind of community practice within the group. Like, do you see any value in approaching those guys to discuss further what benefits there could be?
Yeah, for sure. And there's certainly some very, very big billion-dollar projects in D&D that are going to need to be paying attention to this. DEA as a team is the coach, not cop. The cop aspect has to come with enterprise governance. And there's a ton of governance bodies inside the organization that already do this governance. What we want to be able to do is arm them with the information and then have, chief of force development say, no, that we don't need that capability because it overlaps here and we've got duplication. We don't have to do that in the enterprise architecture cell. We're just enabling the governance bodies that are in the organization to do that. And so that's where our talks with CCSI to get them enabled to be able to do that. And they will act as those cops. They will act as those integrators. We don't have to do that in the enterprise architecture. Oh, I see Tamara, which means we're probably running over on time.
No, that's okay. Just in the interest of time, a reminder to everybody that we do have an open forum at the end. So if there is any more questions or comments for Vince or Chris, you are more than welcome to stay on at the end. So next we have Devlin, CloseReach's Devlin, to introduce the 10.8 dashboards. If you want to jump in, Devlin.
Yep, sure thing. I will share my screen. All right, so we all know 10.8 came out back in March, but in these QEG meetings, we haven't had the opportunity to look at some of the new features, and there were quite a few new features that were added in. So we decided to tackle the dashboards first, since they're the most forward-facing new feature that we thought, because it's going to affect how you interact with all of your diagrams. So this is the standard view that we've used since, I believe, since 10 came out, maybe even going back to QualiWare 6. But there's this new option up here, this layout, and it's a drop-down that contains a couple of dashboards. And these dashboards were provided out of the box by QualiWare. It's possible when you upgrade your environment that these won't be automatically loaded into your repository. So I am going to show where those are and how to configure them after I've quickly gone through what's on the dashboards. So we'll go to the first one here. So this dashboard is fairly simple. There's only a few tiles, but we can already see that it's a pretty big difference from what we had before. So what's nice about this is everything here is context sensitive to the diagram. So right now we're seeing the responsibility for the diagram as a whole. We're seeing governance information. We're seeing aligned with, which is getting information from the activities on the diagram as well. But what's nice about this is that it's also context sensitive to another level. So you can select your business processes, and we're going to get all the information for the business processes as well. The collaboration is only context sensitive for the diagram as a whole, and it's going to show you non-conformances and change requests and comments for the diagram. The description down here as well is also sensitive to the business processes that you select. And as well, if you click off of the business processes, it goes back to the diagram as well. So there's only a little bit on this dashboard. The more interesting one is our analyzing and improving. So these top items are all fairly similar to the first one, but we've got a few more options. So the first one here, we've got an edit option. So this is going to allow you to edit the properties on the diagram using spreadsheets. So it's going to bring up just all of your business processes that are on that diagram and give you a bunch of options for editing. It's much easier using this than going into each business process individually and updating them, or creating a spreadsheet separately and having to go find it to update your objects. And that's what all these three objects here are, different edit forms for your business processes on this diagram. And if we go down to visualize, this is going to give you a couple of 3D visualizers for, well, we'll just open one here. We'll go with the model context. And this shows you a context view for your business process diagram. And it's animated, so it shows you what's feeding into the business process and then what's coming out of it. And then we can also expand on this. Whoops, let me close that. We can also show links on this one, show all. So we can expand this out so we can end up showing links really as far as you want to go with it. So it's a pretty handy tool. I'll close this one here. And there's also, so this one's a little different. This one, I like to call it, it's a bit of a spider web. It's a little messy. We'll take a look at it. It's another 3D visualization that's going to show you every link possible on this diagram. And we can see there's quite a bit here, but we can narrow it down by selecting a process, and it will highlight specific items that are linked to that process. And we can select anything on here, drag it around. So yes, next. So analyses are just going to be, these are a couple of QRVs that QualiWare set up for us for this. We've all seen QRVs before, but we can check one out. And again, these are all sensitive to the diagram. Now this one I find particularly useful. So this one is going to visually affect the diagram itself. So right now, everything here is lit up, but if we go here, none of these symbols have a risk on them. So if we select here, this applies a filter to the diagram so we can see that there's no risk here. And it's handy if you've got, what am I thinking of here? Invisible attributes that aren't immediately apparent on the diagram. So I know for sure that some of these are informed by information systems, but we can't see that. So we can go down here and check IT support, and this will highlight everything that's informed by IT. So then these tiles they kind of echo what the old tabs were on our classic view. So we've got a RASI, which we've all seen. We've got the standard context view. So we saw the 3D one. There's also just this 2D one. Ratings, if you use them, will show up in here. And governance history and acknowledge history. And there's also this process report, which is another out-of-the-box report that they provided for us in 10.8. It takes a minute to open, so I opened it in advance. And this will come on. It gives us a context-sensitive report in QualiWare for this diagram. If it's going to let me change the page. There we go. So yeah, we can see the diagram, and the remaining pages all cover all of the processes on this diagram. And these last 8 tiles, they're all business charts. So I'm not going to open all of them, but we can see we've got easy access to cost information, number of processes on the diagram. I believe this one shows governance status, so we can see what's been approved, or how many have been approved and how many haven't. So that's it, the general content that's on here, and something that's a little handy. So most of this is configured in QLM, but there is a little bit of configuration you can do from the website. So I don't use Social Behavior Warehouse, and that's what these 4 tiles are for. So you can click this change layout, and we get options to change this. So I'm not using these things. I don't want to see them. So we can take them out. And I don't like how this is sized, so we can change the size. So it's nice. It's fairly configurable. You can't add new information here, but you can configure and streamline it a little bit for your own purposes. And if you don't like the changes you made, it's easy enough to reverse. So that's the web side. So now I'm going to show you where these things come from. We can go HTML. So these are called...
Does anybody have any questions before we move on?
Yes, I have one. I just raised my hand. Hopefully, this is James.
Sure, ask away.
Yeah, when you were showing that customization where you can remove some of the, let's call them tiles, is that per user, hopefully?
Yes. Yes, so
okay,
you can see it's saved as a personal layout.
Personal layout. So individually, you will be able to customize it and then revert it back. Okay, that's good.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Anything else? Okay. So in
Yes,
oh,
sorry,
go,
Devlin.
go ahead.
Sam speaking. I'm just curious about the acknowledge. I see that you have a tile for governance and another one with acknowledge a little bit down there. But we don't use acknowledge. Can you just tell me quick what it stands for in QualiWare? I thought it was like something that is not there anymore. Just
yeah. So it's something we actually use it a little bit at CloseReach. There's an object called an acknowledge list, and basically when you have this enabled and you've got people in the organization set to it so that they have to acknowledge this item, they'll go to the diagram and it'll have a button that says acknowledge, and when you click it, it'll show in the history whether a person has acknowledged it or not. And the acknowledged history will show a full list of everyone who needs to acknowledge it, so you'll see everyone who has and everyone who hasn't.
Oh,
I'll give you an example here with our ISO when we our compliance management solution, when we put out a new policy or a new process, and we want to make sure that everybody in the organization is aware of it. Our governance workflow will notify people, and then as they click on that and review it and they acknowledge, they accept responsibility for it. And so this is our way of tracking that everybody is now aware of the new process and should be following it. So that if they're not in the future, we can go back and say, well, hold on. You said that you were aware of this and you're still not following the process. Why not? Do we need to do some more training or whatever else is involved? So governance history tracks something through various states of development and approval. Acknowledgement is at various stages getting people to say, yes, I've renewed, or yes, I've reviewed that. You could actually put that in the circulation step in a governance workflow, forcing people to acknowledge that they've looked at what's been circulated to them. Or at the approval stage, there's something new in place, you need to confirm that you understand. So
okay, thank you. It's good. And I assume it doesn't take a plus license. Any collaboration license can use the acknowledge.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Any more questions? I can't see raised hands, so just yell at me. All right. So in QLM, the dashboard is called the HTML dashboard. You can see I've got quite a few. Almost all of these are out of the box provided by QualiWare. An HTML dashboard item. So it's the HTML dashboard and the HTML dashboard item are the only things we need. So to get these, if you have a 10.5 or earlier environment and you upgrade it to 10.8, these will not be imported automatically. So you'll have to do it yourself. If you make a new repository, they will be imported automatically, but an upgraded one will not. So to import them, I'm just going to show you where the files are found. I'm sure not everyone will have access to this, but be good to know. So you'll find your QualiWare models folder. So you'll go QEF, modules, QLM, 10.8, app, models. And you go to QIS HTML, export files, and what you're looking for is standard template dashboards. And that's going to bring in all of this out of the box dashboard information. And then to set them up, you'll be going into your publisher and business process network. And we can see I've got them set up here already. So you'll go to whichever template definition you want to create a dashboard for. You'll go to dashboard, insert, and dashboard is the only option you'll have here. So QualiWare was kind enough to name them exactly where they should go, which is great. It's nice and simple. And if you still want to have that classic view available after you've done this, you'll need to make sure to enable the layout toggle. And that will give you that drop down with the two new dashboards and the classic view. And that is all I wanted to cover today. Any questions?
So these dashboards and these items that you're seeing in the different sections of the dashboard are facilitated by a series of what we call methods that QualiWare's built, and makes it very, very easy to, a method is just a function. Old days QCL, right? New days, it's a method, and it's C# because it's all web driven. So there's a list of these different methods. We're actually, and you can find a description for them on the COE. Some of the descriptions aren't that detailed. So we're actually in the process of building out a little bit more detail around that, and we can make that available to people. So pretty easy to configure, some specific views, but they're really the views. Those dashboards right now are pointing towards process type models primarily.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very, very much, Devlin. That was very informative. So next up we have Kevin with the Tech Corner, and he's going to be telling us about using the customer journey templates in QualiWare to promote collaboration.
All right, give me just a moment here to share my screen. Okay. So actually, I started this out by saying it was going to be about customer journey maps, but in actual fact, it's about the information behind those customer journey maps that allow you to animate them. And that same animation can be used in a variety of different ways through a thing called the ModelPresentation template. And let me just, there we go. So this template is used for many purposes to display content on the web. Customer journey maps are just one of those things. To do a process walkthrough, to display different versions of information and other things on the web. And I'll go through a bit more I've got a little bit of a deck here to show you some examples, and then I'll go to a live repository and show you what it might look like in the actual web content. The model presentation template points to a specific model. It could be a business process network model. It could be a business capability model. It could be a customer journey map. So each of these model presentation templates that you might create really only point to one diagram. The interesting thing about them is that you have a lot of choices about the type of content that you're going to be dealing with. So for example here, and I'll show you the customer journey map walkthrough in QualiWare in a moment. It's pointed towards a journey map that somebody built. And I'm going to say I want to be able to walk through that map. And here's how I configure the presentation. So when I look at it on QualiWare, I've got controls up here for video. And that's down here, the show buttons. I've got different kinds of content. Go to the beginning, go to the end, repeat, don't repeat. All of those things are my show control buttons. The rest of the content here, I have different panels in my customer journey map. I have a left panel, I can have a right panel, I have a description panel here. So there's a variety of different places that show up on the web, and those are all controlled by how I lay out and how I set up my model presentation template. And here's Here's a further example of that. You know, I have some information I've chosen to show here, you know, in left side content. I have information that I've chosen to show as a right side content here in the middle. And my previous example, I didn't have left or right, so my middle section was much larger. I've got various attributes that I want to show. I've got, you know, where I am on the map and some detail. Interestingly, as you go through a journey, you can actually tell it to show you what this button is down below, and it will show you that in preview. Now, here's an example right here. In this one, we're following through a process, not a customer journey map, but I've chosen to show a process here, and I decompose that. It's visualized by some kind of workflow. Well, as my journey moves through this, you can see here, it's showing me a preview of what's down below. Again, you've got play controls, so you can move forwards and backwards. So those were the different parts that were shown on that model presentation template. And again, it controls what you see. You can see here, there's no left or right content. So your middle panel expands to fill that. I can actually generate a QRV, a pivot, you know, that here are all my model presentations. And a description, different, you know, what are these things showing? And what models are they pointing at that are included? Some of the choices you can make revolve around showing different configurations and revisions within those configurations. I can actually show multiple languages, the same model, both language variants. What different revisions or a specific selection? Gesundheit. A different, I can actually choose a series of unrelated models to show together, or I can walk through a specific model. Here's an example of the evolution of our process map. And some of you that are using the web side of QualiWare quite a bit have probably seen this type of thing. Over here, I can have my different revisions. And I click on a particular revision and up it comes. So here's one way, rather than, you know, having to page through, you know, again, depending on how you set up your publisher, I can actually go and look at all my previous revisions for that particular model. I can choose show me language variants for a particular business process network diagram. Here it is in English. Here it is in French. So again, in the classic view, those things are going to show up at the top here, you know, as language variants. And again, I've got my controls here. So I can actually look at both my English and my French language variant quite simply without changing my working language. I wish I could do that for multiple models at the same time, but the way the model presentation template works is that it acts on a specific model. But if I'm going through a series of diagrams with different people and I want to do a review, it might be fairly easy for me to set up a whole series of those models, point to them with a QRV, and have them go through and review the French and English or the revisions very quickly. QualiWare always told us we could never show French and English on the same diagram. Well, this is kind of a small workaround around that. I can easily click to the 2 different revisions or 2 different language variants that way, or through my various revisions. And if we go back to the very beginning, you can see here, all revisions in the current configuration, revisions across configurations, all language variants, a custom selection of templates, or the traditional walkthrough, from object to object on that particular diagram or that particular model. I'm going to stop sharing this, and anybody have any questions first? James? Or is that an old question? Oh, okay, James.
Yeah, that's an old hand, and the leave button is next to the microphone button. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Hasn't happened
All
for a
right.
while, and it happened now. Okay, not a good timing. Thanks. Sorry.
All right.
Steve Hayward.
Oh, okay, Steve.
Hey, Kevin. We do quite a few presentations where we walk people through what we've built. So could you use this tool to script those kind of walkthroughs?
Yes.
So typically, like, we'll start at a higher level, and then we'll go through that diagram, then link down to a lower level concept in the diagram, then link down to another lower level. Because because we're struggling right now in getting multiple people that can do these presentations, but if we can script the whole thing, it sounds like it's an interesting way that we can actually not rely on single people to give these demos all the time.
Yeah, if you select custom selection here, you can pick the specific diagrams, specific models that you're going to be looking at. So you could pre-build, that really it's a slideshow, right?
Well, that's where I was going, right? It seemed
it
is giving slideshow functionality.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, you could pick again whatever you're looking at, whether it's drill down through sets of models or whatever that is. The interesting thing about the walkthrough, when you're going through it, you can actually preview what's at a lower level, and you can actually click on that icon and it will drill down for you as well. So there's a couple of different ways you might want to experiment to try to accomplish what you're talking about.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay, I'm actually going to go over to a QualiWare repository. Just give me a minute here to see if I can find it. All right. So actually here I'm showing an application architecture from the base configuration. If I have multiple of those, and you can see the up and down arrow, this is demonstrating how you can show across configurations what your different, or within the same configuration, what your different revisions are. So you can configure that stuff to show what you need to show. And I want to go here. Customer journey map. And so if I choose walkthrough, it's going to put a title called customer journey up here. And I can start that. And I think people have seen this demo before, right? You can walk through all the various steps in that customer journey map. And it will display what I showed you before, information above, to the right, attributes down below, and I can have a left and right panel as well. What I didn't know until a short time ago, it doesn't need to be a customer journey map. It could be a business process network diagram. It could be any of those kinds of process models where I'm going to walk through various steps, and I can stop, start it, repeat it, etc. You can display video, whatever you need to in a particular, panel here. And this is how, this is an alternate way to walk people through through a process flow to review or whatever. If I go here, So I'm manage human resources, and I'll go over to revisions. Here I'm showing other revisions. I'm only publishing one right now, but I could just as easily publish all of them so that people can see how has this changed over time from the web very easily. In QualiWare, it's easy, right? You can go just select, hey, show me this other revision. This is how you might do that on the web. You know, to be able to show people different revisions. And again, you know, your controls here help you move up and down through those models, etc. Back to the top. And to go look at here I have a particular process flow. And I might have different versions of heat maps that I'm showing here. So again, you can use the Model Presentation Manager to display different types of content for a particular diagram or model to make it easier for your audience to consume that information on the web. And again, really, what is this? This is equivalent of a PowerPoint presentation, right? You know, I've got different sections that I'm going to look at. So that's all I have to show. I just wanted to give people a flavor of you know, what's possible. I think in the past we sort of talked about you know, customer journey maps, you know, as sort of the only thing that can be animated on the web. And that's not the case. You know, walking through a process flow, some kind of model, walking through different kinds of content. You know, very easy to use some of those options. So if you combine this with some of the new views, I think you've got a lot of choice. Great. Thanks, Tamara.
Thanks, Kevin. So that's it for presentations, but we can open the floor for any comments or questions for any of the presenters.
JR, you could show your bug.
Yeah, I was going to see if there was any comments though for the presentations, but I could, yeah. All right.
Okay.
This will be quick.
Open chat. JR has something to present.
You seeing that?
Yeah.
Dialog layout. So when you open up an HTML dialog layout and you want it, and it's a single link, this button is going to bring me to what I want to link to. And you'll notice there's no new button here. In a multi-link, I don't think, yeah, here, there is a multi-link here. And I disabled it on this one, so bad example. But it's the single link that was giving me an issue. So I called Samuel up and said, you know, what the hell, you have the same issue. And he did. And we did a little bit of troubleshooting. And it has to do with how I have upgraded QualiWare over time. So there is a QRV, where are the QRVs? And there is a default QRV. It's under default query. So this default query probably got created in an older version of 10. I'm going to guess 10.1, 10.2 when we upgraded. And I thought it was fine. Like this hasn't changed too much, except under select, which is what the single link uses, there's no create button. But for multi-link, there is. If you were to look at 10.4 out of the box repository, brand new, you would see a create button here. So add a standard create button, you're good to go. So I'll just apply that and I'll show you the difference. Because there's no publishing. It's just, it'll work. And I now get a create button. Now, if you don't want the create button, well, then that goes back to this form, the dialog layout, where you put in the QRV to customize this look. And that's what I was doing with my contacts here, because I don't want you to create a person. Person is coming from Active Directory. Do not go and create a new person. And I limited it to just show the name. So that way I can do a search and just, I found my name was always popping up all over the place because I touched a lot of things. Now it's just finding me. So this is a custom QRV, but because my default didn't have a create, any of my custom ones didn't have a create either. So it has to be in the default. And it just goes back to, you know, if you've got a brand new version, you'll be fine. If you don't, and I was thinking, Denise, if you're still out there, check your default query and look to see if you have a create button. Sam and I did not.
So we'll go and check this out. Good thing Devlin's on the line here.
Yeah, but if you're upgrading, you'll see the issue. But I don't know when this, because I'm guessing they fixed the QRV, the default query, maybe in 10.3, maybe in 10.2. But for me and Sam, we didn't have a create button. So just go and check it out. But now any custom QRVs that I am using, I can then enable or disable that button. If it's not on here in the default, it is not on anything.
So then it's not an option for anything else you're creating.
Exactly. And that was the troublesome. It's like, how the hell did you do that? Anyway, that's it.
Okay.
Sam, I see your hand was up.
Yes, and this is you hear me? Wait, yeah, okay. This is a concern because, for example, I don't want the create to be available to my users by default. I want to add the create when I need it and need it only, right? There's kind of a protection. So by having the default query driving the ability to see our create options, it's a concern for us. This is why at the moment I will try not to have it in there and remove it by default. But by doing this, it doesn't allow me to add any create option in any of my single link. So just giving you a heads up that I can see it as a bug.
You could see that as a bug because I would agree. 9 times out of 10, I don't want you creating.
I don't know if that's a bug. I mean, you can add it to the default. That's fine. But if you don't want by default, then you remove it. Then any new single link that you put on any form, you decide. And if you do want one, then you actually put the
but it doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. That's the problem.
It doesn't work. That's the point of the bug. It doesn't work. I need to show you.
If you put a QRV on a single link and the form, that with the create button, other than the default, you're saying it doesn't work?
Does not work. Correct.
Okay.
Right. And I can't easily find one to show you that. But you'd have to test it. And I tell you, it didn't work for Sam and I. How's that? I had to put it in the default first.
So JR, Devlin will reach out to you sometime this week to sort of chat through this a bit further, and we'll do some investigation and do some chatting with QualiWare. You know, whether that was intentional or not, you know, or when that got added, or the fact that, you know, you can't you know, how do you get rid of it and include it without having to go and change your default?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the wrong one. I want to make sure I put it back on, that's all.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, JR.
Yep.
Thanks, Sam.
Anybody else? You know, Anybody having any issues with any upgrades they're doing, or how many people do we have left on?
25.
Okay.
Should D&D share some of our experiences?
Go ahead, Adam.
We're finding a number of JavaScript issues in 10.8.2. So anyway, we're just in different areas, but multiple times we're finding that whoever is coded at QualiWare is going to put a value into a variable. It turns out there's no value, and then they immediately try to run a function on it, and then it just crashes the JavaScript. So I mean, we found 3 of these so far, and just from trying out different functionality.
If you could share the details, Adam, that'd be good.
Yeah, I was looking for that email that you sent around a while ago with the list of people, and I couldn't find it because it's been a while.
Okay.
I was going to share it with you guys just to let you know, but yeah, I'm happy to share.
Okay. I know there was a couple governance issues with scripts where you're comparing dates. I went, screw it. It's easier to write your own than to troubleshoot and submit a ticket and wait 2 years. Just rewrite it and move on.
We have 2 issues with French. I know that not everyone is doing that, but in 10.8.2, one is pretty serious, I guess. It's the when you promote a French diagram to the base, the English is already in the base. When you go back to the private workspace, you're going to mostly see English objects on the French diagram, oddly enough.
And I gotta be honest, I saw that from Cecile. First time I think I've ever seen that, and I went, yes, it's about time that is shared, something like that, a bug. So thanks for submitting, and I don't know if Cecile's still around here, but I thank you for the email.
Yeah, Cecile's off today. Her mom is quite ill, and so she's giving us what little time she has available right now while she deals with a home situation that's pretty serious. So great.
The second issue we just discovered for the French is with the spreadsheet. We just discovered it just basically a day or so ago, and so we haven't really had a chance to go deep on what exactly is going on. But the spreadsheet seems to work fine in English, but not sure if this is a JavaScript issue or what. But something's going on with the French. I see Kevin Wilson has his hand up. It was his team that reported it. So.
Yeah, just Par and I took a little bit of more deeper look into it. We think it works fine as long as you don't create a French language variant of the spreadsheet. I may have got that wrong, but we were able to get it working, but it was not following the strict create French language variants all the way up the chain and down again. But we want to test that again before we reach out to you guys.
Great.
Okay.
I was just sharing that, hoping that in the future, QualiWare D&D took a little bit of time to catch up to the latest version of QualiWare. So we're hoping we're not going to be on the bleeding edge and seeing lots of issues as we upgrade and try and keep up.
Par just corrected me there in the chat.
Oh, French variant of the spreadsheet is okay.
Yeah, it's the generic query that we don't create a French language variant, and then it seems to work.
Right. So you have one query, and you've got a French spreadsheet and an English spreadsheet.
That appears to be the case.
Okay.
We'll be documenting it and sending off a ticket once we have all the details and stuff. It is very time consuming, I find, these tickets. I think the last one I did, you know, QualiWare asked for a video walkthrough of the issue, and I figure I probably spent, I don't know, 3 hours probably gathering all the information and documenting it and everything. Probably even more if you include all the testing and everything to make sure that it's, you know, properly documented.
I'm not sure you need to take it quite to that level, Adam, but you might be saving yourself. I can't say definitively, but you might be saving yourself some grief later by doing it now. But they've told us as long as the videos show sort of the base problem that's occurring, you know, that, you know, it points them in the right direction, then that's sufficient.
We just feel we've gotten a lot of pushback over the years from QualiWare when we go to submit issues. You know, they always want it demonstrated in an EAM2 repository, not in our own meta model. And
you know. Well, it comes back to customization, right? Like we see a lot of things actually from different departments, and you know, some of them are self-created bugs, shall we say, because of the configuration or customizations they've done. So, but I get what you're saying.
Vince has a question.
Yeah, I may have missed it. Did we get an update on when the automated license management's coming out? Is that still on track to release? I thought that was September was the target month for that.
Actually, I gave that right at the beginning, Vince. Weren't you listening?
I was listening. I must have missed that particular part.
No, it's end of October.
Okay, thank you.
Is the word that we have. So when I was talking to them, I said, okay, so end of October / early November. And they said, no, it should be end of October. So my response is end of October / early November. Because it's, again, it's at the same time as the 10.9 is supposed to be coming out. So, you know, where are they going to spend their resources? I'm not sure. So. Hope that helps. Anybody else? Anything? Great. Wrap it up, Tamara.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining in. We will have another meeting at the end of next month, and so just keep checking your inbox for an invite.
Yeah, next month I think we're having a presentation from the guys from Edgy about that meta model and how it might be used. So should be interesting.
Perfect.